I guess I've had a question over the years: is student ministry antithetical to urban ministry? Welcome, Tim, to the Urban Ministry Show.
Thank you very much.
How long have we known each other?
I don't know. I lose track of time. I remember being a teenager and everything. I remember and everything after that kind of gets a bit. Yes, so I don't know.
I know what you mean. It's like after the age of 18, everything's just one like block of adulthood.
Yeah.
It's got to be. It's definitely over a decade, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it must be.
And I think we first met at New Life Church.
To a church.
That's
yes.
Right. You was visiting all the way from Birmingham.
Yes.
And how long you been living in Birmingham now?
We have been living here since 2003. So what's that? Just coming up 16 years this month.
Okay. Cool. And what part of Birmingham are you in? Is it inner city? Is it what?
So we live a suburb. So we live in a suburb in the north of Birmingham. But it's interesting here because lots of people live in our area who have moved out of inner city. So again, so a lot of our neighbours live inner, and we've all kind of come from the inner to the outer.
Yeah. So like back in the day, inner city was literally inner city, and then over time, what was inner city has been spreading out further and whether you're in London or Birmingham, right, is spreading out further, and a lot of things from inner city culture have been spreading out to outer city and yeah. So that term inner city is a bit problematic these days, isn't it? Because we say it, and people are often thinking geographically of literally inner city, but often when we say inner city now, we're really talking about the culture that used to be associated with inner city but has spread out. Does that make sense?
In London as well, it's gentrification has changed everything up. So we don't have that to the same extent here. So I guess the people, by and large, black, South Asian people that kind of came into the inner areas of Birmingham are all now moved, well, for the last whatever many years that have been moving out into the suburbs. So I guess it's a bit different because I guess in your inner city areas, as they were once called, gentrification is round every corner. Not the case here.
Okay, right, yeah. So now also, as well as inner city kind of having different meanings, the word urban has kind of taken on different meanings over time and from different groups as well, right? I don't know if I've told you at all, if we've ever chatted about how my definition of urban's changed over time. Like for me, when I used to say urban, I was chatting about inner city, right? Now, obviously, in different contexts, it would mean different things, but a lot of time in general, when I said urban, I was chatting about inner city. Now, for me, I've broadened it out to when I chat about urban, I'm now chatting about all kinds of people, meaning that in urban areas now, you have got all kinds of people living within a few meters of one another.
Absolutely.
Which didn't used to be the case so much before. No. Before, like, it literally was like in a city area, one type of people living in one area, one type of people living in another area, and now it's really mixed up a lot, isn't it?
See, that's London. I think that's less so here.
Okay.
So you can go around lots of areas of inner Birmingham, and you will find largely people of one ethnicity.
Right.
Two, three ethnicity. Other people are there. There's no ghettos. They don't exist. But there are places where a lot of people, particularly of South Asian heritage, will live. And there's reasons for that. It's, white flight has been massive here. Where the city council has housed people has also been a big factor as well. So again, and also, people want to live by their families, by people that that are like them as well, comes into it. So yeah, I think these are some of the differences in London and Birmingham.
Got ya. And for yourself, I don't know how you would describe it yourself. I know you used to describe it as mixed heritage family. Do you still use that term for yourself?
I don't know, what do we call ourselves? So basically, as you can see, I'm a white guy, and my wife's family came from Barbados in the 60s. So I don't know, African Caribbean, and obviously as a result, my children, mixed parentage, I guess is what we do, isn't it? Yeah.
And in Birmingham, is that quite common?
Not massively, no. I think particularly again in the inner areas, there are some, and it would be growing, but it's not. Yeah, I wouldn't say it was as common as in London.
Got ya.
I always remember when we first came here, and this was about 2003, 2004, and we was driving down the road, and we was walking down the road, and somebody said, "Remember that?" Someone said down the car, "She's with a white guy," which again would be less of a thing that you'd probably say in London at that time, you know.
Yeah. And has that also been changing in Birmingham over time? Would you be less?
Yeah, of course. You know, when people live by each other, people have relationships with each other. But again, I do think Birmingham again is our view of it is we think it's quite a segregated place.
Yeah.
So people may mix in the kind of public sphere when they're on the road or in the shop or in schools to an extent. Although again, when you go to quite a few schools in Birmingham, again, often you will find 95% or so of a particular ethnicity, particular religion, etc. But sorry, back to the question. I lost my train there.
No, it's all right. What you were saying was fine. I can't even remember.
Question, no, because I was answering it and then I forgot halfway through.
I can't even remember what my question was. But I think
no, it's about the segregation thing.
Yeah.
So certainly, I think when people go back to their families, go back to the social institutions connected with their class, with their ethnicity, their religion, they are more segregated than in London.
Yeah.
Again, so I think there's reasons for that. You know, lots of reasons for that.
So in Britain, right, we're seeing lots of different people groups that in some situations are mingling more, and
often,
in some,
I would say, more middle class people. So when people move, Black, Asian, minority ethnic people move to the suburbs, often then, because there's that, people have no choice. I think, again, we talk about the mixing. So in Birmingham, white flight has been huge. So if you look at the stats for the city, 2011, 2001, 1991 censuses, you will see white British people are getting less.
Okay, so they're moving out of Birmingham.
Moving out of Birmingham.
Mm-hmm.
That's not saying they're not still coming. Again, and people come to study, people come to work for a bit. Actually, overall, those numbers are going down. And, you will see, drive around in the area. I think we did that a few years back, didn't we?
Yeah.
You came up to a conference and I showed you kind of what it was about. And again, it's very different to London now that you have. Whereas, again, wherever you go in London, you will find gentrifiers, by and large, next door to kind of working class people who live in housing association, live on estates and stuff, literally next door to each other. Mm-hmm. Less so here.
Got ya. Yeah, okay. Now, so let's say, like, back to your family, right? You've married someone from a different culture to yourself, in a sense. The same way that I married someone from a different culture to me. And we come together and we're family. And that is, in the Bible, that's what you see happening in the church, right? You got Jews and Gentiles, you got these different people groups coming together and being family, being Christ's family. And then in the book of Revelation, you got this vision at the end where you got people from every tribe, tongue and nation all there together as God's family. So the direction of people in God's family is all these different people groups coming together and becoming one, God's children together, right? Now, in terms of in the church, we're not always seeing that in the UK, are we?
No.
And you posted a really helpful thing on Twitter the other day, linking to something you'd written where you'd written up some notes from some authors who were chatting about student ministry and I found it really deep because it was talking about some of the effects of student ministry. And the reason why I found it deep was because I can't speak for all types of Christians in the UK, but I'd say within some tribes in the UK, Christians heavily target university students.
Yeah.
And there's a big impetus trying to reach university students. And I guess I've had a question over the years, is student ministry antithetical to urban ministry? And I think if you raise that question, there's quite a bit of fragility that comes back. Sometimes people get worried. I've actually had it posed to me first the other way when people have heard about the ministry that I've been trying to do over the years. People have said, whoa, aren't you going to create an imbalance? You keep reaching urban heads. Isn't this going to create an imbalance in God's church? Obviously, from my direction, it doesn't feel like there's an imbalance of too many urban heads. But some people say, look, it isn't a zero-sum game. If you plant student churches, then it doesn't mean that you don't end up with urban churches. And they're talking about in terms of resources, and they're claiming if the kingdom spends money on, as in God's kingdom spends money on student ministry, it doesn't take away from money to urban ministry. And I think, that's something that could be debated. But what this work that you were referring to by Aune et al., that work was actually suggesting something different, I think, if I was understanding it right from your notes, that actually some of the student ministries that we've been doing over the years can actually perpetuate a kind of classist and racist Christian culture, which then does actually end up being antithetical, as in opposed to, standing against and standing in contrast to actually having churches with all kinds of people and having a church family with every ethnicity and every class. Was I reading that right?
100%. Yes. I think first, before we get into this, I think probably good, and I'm sure you would agree 100% with me. We pray for, we want outreach to students. We are grateful for every work that seeks to reach them at this key age, that seeks to disciple them. We are grateful for every leader that has come through the student movements. Certainly on a Sunday morning when we're on our way to church, we pray for a load of different churches in different places, and we include many student churches in that. And actually, I think I was saying to you the other day, which I've not told before, I was actually the president of a student Christian union in my university.
Yeah. So
again, we're not saying it's all evil and it's all terrible and nothing like that. I think my words that I try to use about this is we have we're not balanced in our movement.
Yeah. So you've been a student.
We could move to kind of more emotive words, but let's just leave it unbalanced. But back to the piece.
So Tim, let me just stop you there just to recap on that, because I think that's really important. You were a student and 100%. You were in your university's Christian Union. You were on the committee, and you were actually the president of that committee.
And then I can beat that as well. I was then the evangelism secretary after that as well.
Okay. So you're coming from a position of, look, I've been heavily involved in student ministry
when I was at university, yes.
And I'm living in an urban area, and I got a mixed parentage family, and these are my thoughts. And similarly, when I was a student, I've been for a few times a student, but I was also in the Christian Union and on the committee. It was part of UCCF. I didn't really understand what UCF was exactly at the time. I understand it a bit better now. But so both of us have been involved in student ministry, 100%. Benefited from it, seen people discipled, seen people 100%. Saved, and that. And so we're not like haters, and we're not saying let's not do it. And we're not saying we're not grateful for all the good stuff that's come through that.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. So with that sort of like preamble, caveat, disclaimer type thing, go through with about from the stuff you read from Aune, and what's the name of the work?
So the name of the book is Christianity and the University Experience, and it's by Aune. Apologies if I've mispronounced your name. Guest Sharma and Warner, 2013. Christianity and the University Experience.
Cool.
And what it then identifies, which I think anyone that is knowledgeable or knows conservative evangelicalism, they make the point that there are churches that are built on student outreach. So the whole thing, student outreach begins, and then the church grows out of that. And again, I can give you a few little quotes here. These are often, not exclusively, evangelical churches that may practice youth-orientated worship, engage in student-centered ministry, establish links with campus-based organisations as a means of recruitment. They then offer students positions of responsibility and leadership. These churches often have large staff teams, internment schemes to attract students to work for a year or so afterwards. They do surrogate parenting, mentoring schemes, and then provide a significant support network beyond for the students who come. So again, and then they make the point at the bottom of that paragraph, these lively churches are likely to appeal to students seeking a church in which they can spend time with others of a similar age, education, and social background.
Okay.
And again, I think kind of make the one point there about unis. Again, I don't know if people have picked up recently, there is increasing research on universities themselves about how helpful, conducive, positive they are for people who aren't in middle class backgrounds. So again, we've got kind of Diane Ray has written a lot on experience of working class people. Others, Sarah Ahmed, others have written about people of colour in universities. So I guess we're kind of, the university is not a neutral institution. So things, and I think perhaps we've not considered that. That's the first thing perhaps we haven't considered when we are working with universities.
So let me just check that I'm getting this right. There are a lot of the conversation about student ministry in our circles over the years that I've heard goes back to the middle class experience and says look how great this has been, and it's the positive stories are told from the middle class experience, and if you only hear that story, then it's like, well, yeah, this is great. What's not to like? And I think the whole support thing of supporting people it sounds like a real good positive, like making sure people are supported.
For the young people. And to be blunt, that's what the church should be doing.
Yeah.
Fully support. Do you know what I mean? The church, when we think of, again, me and my wife often talk about, how we bring young people up as Christians, how they are matured, and the support of a church is invaluable. And I think what is done with the students is actually a model for everybody else. And, I think we can learn a lot from the student movement in how they support students in this important part of their lives.
Yeah, I hear you. So what it sounds like the research that you've been reading, and thank you so much for all the research you do. I know, like, you're non-stop reading stuff and researching stuff.
I'm very boring.
No, it's a blessing for the church. I think it's a gift, and I think the research you're reading is highlighting the experience of other groups and saying, look, the stories from groups that are, and I hate to say non-middle class, because then it makes middle class seem the neutral and the center from which we judge others. But it's just what I'm trying to quickly sum up and say, people who aren't from that background, their experience at university, even their experience of Christian ministry at university, is often not as positive as the middle class experience. Yeah. Is that fair to say?
You've gone on there, so I guess I was setting that up by looking at the broader research on the university as an institution, how people of colour, working class people get on within it. Aune, Guest, Sharma and Warner then talk about how the experience of working class people specifically within kind of student ministry. And again, they set that up as well. And I don't think we're being controversial to say this. And certainly researchers would say that, you know, conservative evangelicalism is middle class in its essence, not just in its makeup, but in the norms that are put to us, in the environments that it creates. I don't think that's controversial in the main. I'm not saying there aren't places where it's less so, but in the main it is. And I think again, going back to the research in Christianity and university experience, the writers there talk about how class does figure, I'll read it out, in Christian students' negotiation of the university environment. And that can be in a positive way, so actually it can bond people together of a similar class, but also it can act kind of in an exclusionary way when people who are different come into those student Christian settings. And again, people make mention then of how of the particular support networks that perhaps more traditional middle class students get. They talk about camp networks and other supports from churches. Let me just read what it says here. Okay, so what they say is class and hierarchy still structure students' interactions with the university experience, affecting which church a student attends, how comfortable they feel in different university surroundings, and which social networks they become involved with. As students plan their futures and seek entry to graduate careers, their economic resources and social networks will help shape their future. So again, reinforcing the importance of class.
So
in British society in general, in the uni, but also in their experience of university Christian groups as well.
Yeah, and that really struck me when I read that what we're talking about is well, firstly, nothing is taught in a vacuum. So you go to university, you're not just learning the facts that you are taught from the front or from textbooks. You are learning from the environment in which it is taught. And the same thing happens then in the Christian union you're part of, or the student church you're part of. Even if you're hearing the Bible taught verse by verse every week, there's an environment in which it's taught, in which means that we are actually learning social norms. And then as a Christian student, you're learning social norms. And it can be that you're learning, it is normal for me to hang around with people who are just like me. It's normal to hang around with people who are university educated, who are white, who are middle class, and that kind of thing. Whereas in the church, that shouldn't actually be too normal unless you're living in a village where it literally is white, middle class people all over the shop.
And that I feel is perhaps one of the missed opportunities when you have a student church. So again, in my experience, lots of people come to big cities and they to uni and they go to a student church. And they've come from, a lot of them have come from pretty homogenous backgrounds themselves, which is, again, no one's knocking that. God has sovereignly put them there. But then when you come to such a church, you'll then stand with people like you. And actually, if the church is so focused on that, you are denying people the opportunity. Church can be, as we've talked about, an environment where, again, and we would argue, that should bring together people who wouldn't be together in the world. You know, we would say that's one of the hallmarks of the gospel, in that actually it can touch people who actually in the world would never talk, and then they're brought together in the church. And again, we see that so clearly in the New Testament. And I guess if we're setting up just a student church, they're not going to have that experience. Now, again, I actually think there's been a change here. So going back to when I was a student, I actually went to a church in a city to coin our phrase, that wasn't in the city, I guess, as classically defined. And interestingly then, the students weren't that high on the agenda. So I think I remember over my whole time there as a student, one student meeting. There may well have been more at the church. That was it. We come along, and then I had the opportunity there. There were people that were of different culture and ethnicity to me. Our youth work was, again, very different to kind of, to kind of what I had come from. So I had the opportunity then, and that actually got me, along with other things that got me thinking of stuff for my whole life about people, thinking about different people's experience, thinking about, even to the point of how people got on in church. Do you know what I mean? And it all goes back to when I went to this church as a student. Because, and I had, the church was also kind of multi-generational, so there was that element as well. So again, I think perhaps we're moving to one of the perhaps less helpful points of the student church, with denying the opportunity for God's people to meet with people who are different. But so particularly if they're in a uni with the same kind of people, and then they come to a church with the same kind of people, again, that opportunity for sanctification and understanding other people, there's been an opportunity missed there.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So this, I think this is quite big, really. In a lot of people's formative years of what it means to be a Christian and to be part of God's family, people are often missing the opportunity of meeting people who are not like them and seeing the needs that other people have outside of their circle. So there's it then ends up perpetuating a form of Christianity that can be quite monocultural, and also a type of Christianity that is only actually answering the questions of a small segment of society. And then I want to take that even further. Okay.
Now, some of those churches may run youth works, particularly, or other activities to people that are different to them, but they are still run by people like them. Again, some of my research, there we go. Where's the thing?
Move it more to the left. There you go.
Left.
Yeah, the urban church imagined. Right. Oh, yeah.
Now, the urban church imagined makes the point, as does Mulder in some of his writing as well, that actually one of the problems when a homogenous kind of church or homogenous leader church runs these activities, actually one of the things that can happen is that the stereotypes, the negative views, etc., of that particular group that's doing the work can be reinforced because they're not doing it from a point of view of partnership. They're not doing it from a point of view of actually having the people from those areas necessarily lead and feed in and challenge and help mold. So actually, it's not just a matter of that then church saying, okay, well, we've got to do something in the community, and that kind of being a panacea to sorting out everything else. Actually, those kind of outreaches, and I've seen this myself, having done these things from that place over the years, I've seen how actually, and I'll give you one sad story. For years, so I worked in an area where there was a lot of gun crime, and we had somebody that worked with us for years, and he came in from a different group, from different background, and the church was a different background to the young people we were seeking to reach. And I always remember when I told him once that one of our young people had been shot and had a narrow escape with his life. It was like I told him that the lad had just mowed the lawn. Because again, from the place that we'd done it from, his views had not been challenged. His views about that group of people had kind of remained unchecked, even despite the fact he had the contact with them. So actually, again, perhaps churches need even think on that deeper level to when we do these outreaches, what is that then creating in those that we send to do them?
Yeah, I hear you. It reminds me, it's slightly different, but it's kind of similar in that at our church years ago, we had a local student because, you know, we got a big university. Well, I don't know how big it is, but to us, it seems big on the estate. And a student started coming to our church. And one Sunday, they just said flippantly, like in front of us, not even realizing it would offend, they said, last night I went to a chav party. And, you know, obviously we're all like, you know, all our ears prick up. Like, what's going on here? And then she says, yeah, it was great. I dressed up as a single mum. I stuck a pillow under my t-shirt and everything. And started talking about how great this chav party was, that students were doing caricatures of stereotypes on estates. And we're all sitting there thinking, okay, this is weird, but let's show her love and humility. And then another time she's like, oh yeah, I tell people, like, I go to the ghetto church. That's what I call your church. And that's one of them things where, you know, if some people call it the ghetto church, it's a badge of respect. And then other people call it a ghetto church, then you're like, hang on a minute, where are you coming from on this one? And the thing is, what it was someone had a mindset that wasn't getting challenged. Now, if they'd stuck around with us over time, as we built relationship with her, we could have gently and humbly challenged her. But in the end, she actually chose to go somewhere else, where she felt she could shine more. That was her terms.
And the thing you say, right, that's not the unforgivable sin. See, I think in some ways it's a blessing when we get to have these things out on the table.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? That is an opportunity there for genuine sanctification, for people changing their views, for developing that empathy and understanding and strategic humility. So cool. I think it's beautiful when people come and do those things, and particularly then when God does a work in somebody, of somebody. Because again, let's be honest, we can all front it out that we think everybody's all right. Do you know what I mean? You know, I managed to be nice to you. Do you know what I mean? We can all behave like that, but actually, there's no idea we know what's going on with us, and that's the work of the Spirit in it. It's deep. Yeah. It's to change the attitudes. To change people. So actually, you know, the fact that people say, you know, things that we don't agree with or think are wrong, that ain't the end of the world. That's an opportunity for growth and sanctification.
Exactly, and that's and for me, in many ways, it's a shame that this sister had another place to then go on to where she could say, well, I shine more there, because actually what would have been better would have been if she'd stuck with us, and over time we'd have more conversations, and she would have learned from us and we would have learned from her. Because that's the thing, I know you and me have chatted about this a lot over the years, like having a multi-cultural, a multi-ethnic, a multi-class church means having lots of messy conversations. It's not about saying, look, every single one of us is woke, and it's not a binary thing. It's not like we've got this now and we do this perfectly. Instead, it's like for the rest of our lives together, getting things wrong, saying sorry to one another, being convicted of where we got sinful attitudes to one another, where we've believed wrong narratives about one another, repenting of that, having our minds renewed, and this keeps on going until we die or Jesus returns, right? And
ironically, I think that is one of the blessings of working class brothers and sisters, or working class brothers and sisters from that background, because let's be straight, having a debate or a disagreement, do you know what I mean, is normal. So when I'm at work, I work in a very mixed environment, people different ethnicities, pretty well all from working class backgrounds from inner Birmingham. We debate and argue the whole time, and it's just kind of not. And again, but when I move into other settings, or middle class settings, it's more prickly. So if and that's the interesting thing. And again, I suspect you find this. Well, we all do it, don't we? We mediate our responses, don't we? Do you know what I mean? And hopefully we can get it right. So actually, that's one thing that a kind of mixed church with all work class people would bless the middle class church with. Do you know what I mean? It's more natural to be honest, I think we'd all say.
Yeah.
Whereas they're being polite. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, I guess one thing I want to ask is student ministry antithetical to urban ministry?
No, no. I think it's again and again. Anybody that's seen anything that I write, and in my research, I'm a master's student missiology. I actually think what we've done is we've failed to interrogate our model of church and look at how we've married. I think it comes from a number of places, but American church growth thinking in terms of homogenous unit principle, and how we've married that to the British class and racial caste system. We've failed to interrogate that, and I think the principle of a church based on university students, I think you can get away with that, but you need to make sure that you are actively seeking to counterbalance the negative side of it.
Yeah. Okay.
So you may begin, and again, Stephen Parr's church planting in secular Europe makes the point that it's not sin to begin a church for a particular group, because I think everyone generally does. Let's be honest, we are what we are, and we plant it from that. But actually, if that continues, you then get into problems. So actually, you may begin with a student, but actually, you know, God willing, you'll be saying, okay, well, the Great Commission, etc., commands us to reach all kind of people. We need to then be reaching all kind of people.
Yeah,
you know, for the glory of God, for the sanctification of the students, for our own sanctification, and just to be that witness to the world that different kind of people can live together in God's kingdom.
Bruv, I so badly want to continue this thought about who you start off trying to reach and what carries on, but I reckon we save that for another one. But that's a deep one there, and I'd love us to talk about that more another time. So you're saying it's not, and student ministry is not antithetical to urban ministry, but we need to interrogate it, how we're doing it, yes. And we need to interrogate it particularly along the lines of class and race.
And again, I think we use it. I'm saying interrogate, and we're going class and race. James chapter 2. Can we honestly sit there and say that we are not guilty of James chapter 2 if we're just focusing on those who society values?
Yeah, especially I think when we've even taken, in certain circles, when we say student ministry, we mean university student ministry. Absolutely. We don't mean FE college ministry. Yes. And that's very sad to me as someone who used to teach in an FE college, someone who knows many people in my neighbourhood who go to the local FE college. It's a big missed opportunity. There's a big harvest field in FE colleges, and if we were doing more to FE colleges, and when we said student, we actually meant them, we would actually then be getting a more diverse bunch. So I hear what you're saying about, so when you say interrogate, I'd say like in the Bible, it says take every thought captive to Christ.
Exactly.
You take thoughts, you bundle them in the back of a van, you interrogate them and try and work out, how is this standing up against Christ, in opposition to Christ?
Exactly.
Christ building a family with all classes, with all ethnicities. How are we doing this particular type of outreach? Are there ways that it's actually standing against Christ's plan, even though there's good going on? And even if we were just in the business world, we'd want to reevaluate our model regularly. That's what you want to do, innit? Keep reevaluating. Yeah. At least that's what I remember from business studies.
With the assistance of other brothers and sisters.
Right.
You know, and again, I go back to homogenous unit principle. I think, again, I think, how can I put this? I think much of our student outreach is actually, particularly where it becomes a church, is built on that, but it's not being named. So again, one of the key things in my thinking is how we use that thinking, but actually by not naming it, we've avoided all the debates and discussion for the last 40 years on it, and the critiques of it, you know. And again, I guess we've done it on the basis. I think we have to be honest that actually student ministry has been tremendously blessed, and we thank God for that. That is a work of God. But at the same time, we kind of then have to think, well, okay, what's that led to in terms of our blind spots? And again, I think, to be fair, we see some consideration of that, but interestingly, I actually think some of the consideration of that is also from a homogenous unit principle thinking. Well, we'll plant a church on an estate. Okay, well, we'll plant a church in the city. We'll plant a church in the country for those kind of people. Whereas actually, we should be thinking, well, those churches, particularly when I come to London, are not far from all kinds of different people. I also think the same is true often here in Birmingham as well. What needs to change in those churches so that we can be reaching out as best we can to that wider range of people?
Yeah, I hear you. Hang on a sec. My battery's just died. It's going to do something here. So, Tim, in terms of practical, if anyone was to ask you, well, what practical steps can we actually do about this? What would be practical steps you'd recommend?
One of the things I've been thinking a lot about is leaders and how leaders are prepared. I think one of the other things in my research is that I've seen, and I actually see this in my family, there are particular social skills for engaging with different kinds of people. And I don't think being in a homogenous environment assists the development of those skills. Again, my eldest daughter has just begun sixth form. Throughout her life, she goes from one setting to the next. In fact, we laugh sometimes about the extremes of the people that we go to. Literally, all one kind of people to all another kind of people. What that has done for her, hopefully, it hasn't confused her beyond all recognition. But what that has done for her is start to give her the skills to kind of mediate her responses, to talk, to relate to different kinds of people. Also, again, we've aimed at through teaching as we sought to teach her the scriptures, we've sought to show her about love for neighbour and develop the attitudes of love and wanting to reach out to all kinds of people. One of my big things then is about how our leaders are prepared for this. And again, I think there is a significant issue in leadership training to prepare our leaders, who by and large, let's be honest, we love them, godly men, etc., how they are prepared for ministry in the mixed environment, in our urban, in our inner cities.
Mm. My webcam's disappeared. Where's it gone? It's like, oh, there it is. It's fallen down. Sorry about this.
Nah, no worries.
This is proper urban. See. All right. Sorry about that, bruv. So, yeah. So it sounds like you're saying step one is, in terms of leadership, we need our leaders to act. If it's wrong to see the University Christian Union as the ideal training ground for church leadership, because it's in general a homogenous group. Yeah. There isn't the diversity that you need to learn those skills to be actually leading diverse churches and showing the love of Christ to all kinds of people, right? And on that note, because I realize some people would be listening and thinking, well, hang on a minute, there is quite a diverse bunch at my Christian Union or my student ministry at church. In general, in our circles, yeah, when people say diverse, they mean people from different nations, but they mean people from the same class. They mean middle class people, multi-ethnic, but all middle class. Right.
And I'd add an extra to that, and this is not absolute. I would add, by and large, they're people that are born overseas.
Right.
But okay. One of my big issues, if you come to Birmingham and you spend time with me, we would spend a lot of time with people that are born and raised in Birmingham, but their parents and grandparents came from Caribbean, South Asia, West Africa, etc. As I see it, those people that I meet on a day-to-day, that are my neighbours, that are my work colleagues, that are the young people that I work with, they are not in our churches. So again, I think there's a fascinating article by Geraldo Marti talking about and it's about in America, called The Rise of the Diversity Expert. I also think our leaders, by and large, don't understand, and this is no fault of theirs because they've not come from it. Our leaders not come from these settings, so nobody's knocking them. You know, it's like there's lots of things I don't understand in my life. Okay, but our leaders have a poor understanding of the dynamics of who is in our mixed inner cities. And I think, and as I go around, you know, I'm a church nerd as well. I like to visit different multi-ethnic churches. I don't see those people that I see day to day in our churches.
I hear, bruv. So that's step one. We're saying, look, that context, the student ministry context at the moment as it stands, is not a great breeding ground. That's not the right word. It's not the right environment. It's not the right soil for our future leaders to come from as it stands. So that's the practical thing, number one. Recognizing that's got to change in terms of our leadership development. What would be another practical tip that you'd give us, bruv?
Another practical tip, I would also then go on, give us a bit more of a prod.
Well, if someone was their church was doing some kind of student, I mean, the reason why we're chatting about this is because it's this time of year now where churches are trying to target students, and that for a church, practically, if they were watching this, and there's a lot of humble brothers out there where they, you know, are really wanting to see how things can be done differently, so that our church does really reflect the book of Ephesians more, what you see taught in the book of Ephesians. So what practically could a church do?
Okay, I would also a couple of things. I think they need to think about. I think they need to think about what they do on a Sunday, primarily in terms of how their people behave. I've got a big thing about, we come on a Sunday, we're often given individualistic things to go away with, which is rightly so. We need to be reading the Bible more. We need to be witnessing. Okay, we need to, in our own morality, we need to kind of be watching that, and it's to be done to the Lord. But also, particularly, I think we need to start working on our people to kind of understand that actually we all come with biases and particular views of people. And actually, in our sanctification of brothers and sisters in our church, we need to be aware that often they might well come with wrong views about other people. You know, there is so much in the New Testament, Paul's writing particularly about one anothering, right? How are we enabling the one anothering in our church? Now, that's a big thing. And our leaders are aware of the dynamics that go on in their churches between people. I'm hesitant to give examples.
Sure.
But the classic one is a minority in the church all sit together or all leave quickly after the service.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I'd say, and I was chatting to a brother who you know well the other day, and he was telling me about in his church, which I guess quite a number of the leaders are middle-class background, and, you know, it's in an area where there is kind of everybody lives. So you've got the very rich, and you've also got, you know, people that live in local authority housing. They have some specific ministries to reach out to people from working class backgrounds. And again, I think where they are done carefully and thoughtfully, hopefully taking into account some of the critiques that I mentioned earlier on, I actually think they can be key also. So I guess the points 2 and 3 would be what are the relations like between people in your church? How do people in your church view and treat people? Are you dealing with that in your teaching, in your sanctification, in your discipleship? And then on top of that, then what can you practically do? You know, the children's club is the classic one. Well, I've done them over the years, seen hundreds of young people come in and they all dip as soon as they don't have to come no more. You know, what is it in your area where you can reach out to others? So actually we're having more of that kind of, you know, we're not showing the favoritism. You know, while we may be reaching our student brothers and sisters, actually what are we doing for everybody else? Have we found something that we can do where we can have regular, meaningful contact, where we can share the gospel, where we can share our lives? where actually then there's a way into church for people who haven't got higher education.
And so what about where if people are thinking, shall we plant a student church? What would your advice to them be?
If it's a church primarily aimed at university, Russell Group, whatever it is, students, I struggle to justify that from James chapter 2. And that's not to say for a second that I don't value the ministry that has come out of those kind of churches, that there are not godly people within it, but actually, can we honestly, not just in our bubble of our friends, but can we sit with leaders, mature, wise, godly leaders that are different to yourself, and can you say, I'm not contradicting James chapter 2?
I hear. What would your advice be to any students? So if any students, they just started going to university, they're looking for a church to go to, what advice you got?
Well, again, it's the usual stuff. Find a church that preaches the gospel, that will love you, that will challenge you, that will disciple you, where you can serve. I guess the implication from all that we've been saying would be to not go to one, but I don't think it's that simple.
Not go to one what?
A student church.
Not go to a student church, right?
But I wouldn't even go that far. People got to do what they can do. That they answer. We all answer for what we do before God. But actually, if there is somewhere where you can go, where there are, a range of people, where they love the Lord, where they will love you, look for that. Although I actually think when it comes to our circles, those places are not that they're around, but I don't think there's, often they're not that common.
So would you be, if they had the option, would you be recommending they find a church that is more diverse in terms of class and ethnicity, as long as it is preaching the word? I know I'm putting words in your mouth.
Me now,
I know, sorry.
Yeah, of course. But I also accept that there may be times where people make decisions for different reasons, and they're to make that under God. Again, and I also think there's a bit as well. I think sometimes we all buy into this homogenous unit thing. We'll go to this state or whatever it is, but actually, all churches should be changing in who they are enabled, who they can reach out to, who comes in. Yeah. Particularly I think when we're looking at the idea of multi-ethnic church, sometimes we've got this picture that it's just this group of people that kind of come together and it sort of stays the same. But actually, I think, particularly when we look at the book of Acts and we look at how a predominantly Jewish church then turns into a Gentile church, and we're seeing cultural change within churches. I think actually all churches should be on that journey. Yeah.
Well, you forced me to go there. You forced me to go there because earlier I was tempted to follow this on, but I guess so. I feel like sometimes God puts it on our heart to plant a church for a certain group. Like in my case, it was my local estate. As you know, it was like people on my estate need to know that Jesus died for all kinds of people. And it was specifically trying to target estate culture. And one of the reasons why was because there weren't churches around that were doing that. So there were people who weren't hearing the gospel, weren't getting discipled, and it seemed to be operating along class lines. And I really feel God put that on my heart. Having said that, over the years, through the scriptures, God was speaking to me about how important it is to have multi-ethnic church. Now, on a London council estate, you do get the multi-ethnic on estates to a point anyway. So that was already part of the DNA of the church in a sense. But through the scriptures, it then became to me a bigger thing. And also through the scriptures, the idea of a church being multi-class became a bigger thing. And so even though we're still on an estate, even though we're specifically trying to reach people on an estate, and we particularly have a soft spot for people who are poor and who are people who've had deprived circumstances, at the same time, from the scriptures, we're passionate that our church is multi-class and multi-ethnic. So I feel that if a church is going to start off with a special interest group, that might be okay in the early days. There might even be an imbalance in Christianity that we need to correct, where we target certain special interest groups. But the scriptures should also, and as the Holy Spirit grows his church, the scriptures should also eventually, through the power of the Spirit as well, be making us reach out to people who are different to us and gradually becoming more a reflection.
That's Stephen Pars's point. So you might begin a certain way. And actually, you know, I think so much of the kind of homogeneous unit principle is based on a kind of outdated, discredited anthropology. Do you know what I mean? That people are in these set groups. Cultures change. Do you know what I mean? My kids, I bet like same as your kids, you know, they're different class culture to what we are. Do you know what I mean? They move in different settings. So these things are fluid and are changing. And actually, I guess when we look at, well, take London where you are, there is everybody. You know, you get 100 square meters somewhere, and in a lot of areas, you'll find everybody.
Yeah.
So we then move to the question of how we reach them all, etc., etc. Well, we don't know. And the other thing, I guess, as well, you know, which we have to factor is God's sovereignty. I mean, you may bang away at a particular group for years and years, nothing happens. That may not be your lot in Christ to do that. Somebody else might rock up and they see it all happens. But actually, you're doing what you had, you know, and again, I've had some discussions with people before about the multi-ethnic thing. You know, there is no magic bullet. Do you know what I mean? You know, even though I study it, I'm obsessed with it. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's God's sovereign. But to me, then, whoever you start with, you need to be honestly thinking in the Lord, am I really trying for them? If you know, let's take a random example. Some young black guys come in, cool. Can they come to our church? Can the young Pakistani lads from around the way say they develop an interest in Jesus? Could they come in? And would brothers and sisters in the church welcome them? Or are they not sitting near them? Or would it be a bit weird with them? Do you know what I mean?
And on
people being
on that note,
for that.
So on that note, that's something that a church or a student ministry, even if it's monocultural right now, they can practically start working towards the place to be welcome to all kinds of people, right? 100%. Because it takes a certain amount of, you got to be repenting, you got to be getting educated of all the wrong narratives we've grown up with about different people groups. You got to start meeting people and learning from them and seeing how their life doesn't match the stereotype that you were told all your life and all that kind of thing. Repenting of your pride about it and your self-righteousness about it. So it's not actually, churches can't really do the cop-out of, well, we haven't got anyone here who's different to us in our neighborhood. Because one, that's normally not true. But two, we still need to be repenting of these attitudes that are actually antithetical to Christ's church.
I'll just give you two things there. So firstly, you know, take Luke Acts. Luke is obsessed with different kinds of people in it. Look, and let's be honest, he's making that point. Do you know what I mean? Luke is an apologetic to Theophilus that he can be included in the gospel. So Luke goes on about all the, again, so different social groups, men and women, Gentiles, etc., etc. They're all seen to come into the kingdom. Secondly, and I think this has perhaps not been as recognised, and again, I'm just pointing out what I see from the research, and I can easily critique, or not easily, let's use that phrase. Every group has its sins, okay? Everybody, you know, there are sins of every culture and class, etc., etc. Right, okay. Now I've got that out of the way. The research shows, okay, that there are differing attitudes, particularly with white middle class people, and how they can encounter difference. So again, there are a number of sociological studies of gentrifiers in London and how they then behave with the people that they meet in their areas. And again, I think we need to then be honest. If we are a kind of a mixed church or whatever it is, we're a homogenous church and we're looking to reach out, we need to be aware that our people carry sins with us. We have, you know, James 2 is not in there by accident. Okay. When we look at the sins in Galatians 5 in it with the anti-fruits, Galatians 5 is the fruit of the Spirit in it. It's not 6. Yeah. So the anti-fruit, a load of them are about how we treat people. These things are in us. The effects of the fall, the kind of class and racial caste system in this country is not an accident. You know, the fall doesn't just affect how I treat you, right? it affects everything. And Christ is redeeming everything and will one day bring everything to completeness, and we'll get to Revelation 5 and Revelation chapter 7. But in the meantime, there's a load of aggro. And we see this in the New Testament. We see this in Acts 6 with the... is Acts 6 with the widows in it, or is it Acts 7?
Acts 6, yeah.
Acts 6,
it might
right.
be 7,
we see this in the Jerusalem Council. We see this in Acts 15. We see this in Galatians 2 with Paul having to go up Peter. We see this in Romans 14 and 15 with the weak and the strong, or is it 13 and 14 with the weak and strong? We see this in 1 Corinthians 11 with again, what's going on there with the Lord's Supper, and is it the rich marginalising the poor, and we see this in James chapter 2. We should not be shocked that people come in with wrong attitudes. This is normal. And actually our teaching and our discipleship needs to take that on board, particularly when we're in a mixed area and we seem to reach out to all kinds of people.
Right. So one of your practical things would be, if you are doing student ministry, be teaching this stuff. It's all over scripture. So make sure we're teaching it to counter the prejudices that we have in British culture.
We all have. Have.
Well, look, I mean, that's I'm worried we'll lose people if we talk any more. And you know, me and you, we could go for a few hours, isn't it? But listen, those have been gems. So conclusion, student ministry isn't antithetical to urban ministry, but it does need to be interrogated to make sure that in the long run, it doesn't lead to an antithesis to urban ministry. I think that's what I would say. I'd say it could become antithetical.
That was the last point that they make in the article. Okay, so one of the points that, again, I think a lot of people may know the book Divided by Faith by Emerson and Smith, and they make the point that some of the key doctrines and behaviours of evangelicals in America make reconciliation between black and white people less likely. Because again, okay, and they make the and again in the what's the book again called again? Christianity in the University Experience, they link them that actually, if we are just encouraging homogenous churches, how can we say we're encouraging reconciliation, unity in society? We're actually, and I know we don't mean it, but actually, if we're not equipping our people with the skills to deal with different kinds of people, if we're not seeing different kinds of people together, actually, we are reinforcing segregation and division in our society. So there's a bigger picture. So again, that's not just me saying that. That's kind of when we take a step away from everything and we look at, right, are our institutions, are our churches encouraging good relations in society, or are they not? If you're homogenous and you're not encouraging your people to kind of, not just in the rhetoric, but actually in practical terms in how you organise your church, what you encourage people to do, are you then reinforcing division in society, or are you going against it? Are you fighting it? And I think we kind of have to sometimes take a step back to look at what we're doing and be honest, and get the input of other leaders into what we're doing, to kind of for that advice and that insight.
Yeah, I hear you, bruv. So are we reinforcing the cultural division we have in the UK, or are we reinforcing and working towards the unity that Christ gives us between Jew and Gentile and between rich and poor? Okay. Well, bruv, thanks so much for sharing your insights. I found it helpful what you've shared, and hopefully it will be a benefit to other people. And let's do this again sometime and chat about some more things. There are a whole bunch of rabbit holes there that we could have gone down that maybe we'll do another time. All right. Thanks, bruv.
No problem. God bless.
God bless.